Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Now this week, in a bit of a change, we are joined by our guest, Chris Barnes, who is the CEO of Mission Aviation Fellowship Australia. Now this is an organisation that uses aviation to help people in isolated areas, whether that's getting domestic violence victims out of small towns or transporting medicine or goods. They are there to help for people that don't have any help that can get to them. Chris now is going to talk a little bit about their organisation, kind of how it started and their mission. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. What a lovely introduction.
That's all right.
You've got us in one. Well done.
Now, before we're going to go into detail a little bit later, but for those people in the industry that are kind of unaware of what you do as an organisation, could you kind of give us the gist, the overview to get us started with?
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. So look, we use aviation, right? Aeroplanes to make a difference. So we reach out to isolated communities all around the world. Okay, so we operate in 24 countries and we serve thousands of communities there. And our planes go where others can't, right? There are no roads, right? Often there's no water. So the only way you can get to those places is to walk for days and days and days or to fly. And so we take the planes into those areas where other people don't go. And we then enable those communities to reach back into the world around them, right? We have other aid organisations who come with us and they go there as well. They wouldn't be able to do their job without us because they wouldn't be able to get their people there. They wouldn't be able to get the supplies there. They wouldn't be able to get equipment there. And so we enable both the community to reach back to the world around it and to other organisations to get to them.
Now, you've been the CEO for 18 months or so, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's
18
right.
months or so. It might seem like a little bit of an unusual career choice. It's not an unusual career choice, an unusual job to have. I want to know how you got involved with this. How did your passion for all of this come about?
Okay. Well, it's quite an unusual story. So I'm an engineer. I'm a chemical engineer by background, and I had a long career in the corporate world and enjoyed that. Started in the UK. I worked in Asia and over in Australia. And that career came to an end 2 years ago. And so I was looking for a new role and a new opportunity. And actually my wife said, you know what, we should do something where we can give back to the community, something where we can serve, something with more of a mission focus. And so we started to look around and this job came up. This opportunity came up with Mission Aviation Fellowship. And while I didn't fit a lot of the boxes in that I'm not a pilot, I hope this doesn't switch everybody off from the podcast, and my experience of aviation was more the Qantas lounge. But what I think works and appealed to the organisation and helps the organisation is that over the years I've worked in many aspects of a corporate world, right? So I've had experience in writing strategies, building plans, working out how to fund activities, working with people, all of those different things that ultimately you need in a not-for-profit organisation like ours, the same as in a corporate world.
I suppose it's unique because what I love about aviation generally is it's a very passionate business. It's never for anyone just a 9 to 5. And I suppose you've got that other layer here of it being a charity, being an organisation that's helping people. I suppose your day-to-day is a lot more exciting than perhaps you were used to before.
Oh, it's thrilling. It's great because every day you're making a difference. Every day you get a story that comes through on a feed about somewhere that somebody would have lost their life if it wasn't for us. Somebody would not have been able to get the education that they need if it was not for us. So every day we're getting these stories, right? And we're hearing about what's going on and we're hearing about the difference that we make, right? And it's phenomenal. It is inspiring. And that's what excites me. And so, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's a continuous job.
Yeah. Can you give us some kind of case studies or examples of things you do, and how you've helped certain people?
Yeah, look, there are so many. But look, one that springs to mind is I think this is really quite mind-blowing in that if you go to Arnhem Land, so we work in Arnhem Land, right? So it's one of the communities in Australia. It's the community area in Australia that we support. And while you're in a first world country like Australia, it's amazing how isolated it is. One of the challenges there is for problems with domestic violence. A lot of issues there in the remote areas with domestic violence. And so what we're able to do is fly into those communities and rescue typically the mum and one or more children and bring them back out of those communities to safety. And otherwise they wouldn't be able to escape from that trauma and those difficult situations. And having met some of the people who have come out from those circumstances, it's something that you can't quite comprehend goes on.
I suppose it's like you're another POM in Australia, right? And to an extent, it's a uniquely Australian issue that you have these isolated communities. Can you give us some more examples of this? Because it was interesting what you said earlier. You're working at places where there might not necessarily be a road. There might not necessarily be easy to get out. Yeah. And if you're not able to do something, then there's nothing else out there.
Yeah, no. And you go to PNG, right? And the terrain in PNG really does not lend itself to roads, right? Outside your main centres, there's nothing, right? And so we've got schools in rural communities, regional outlying areas where there are no roads, right? And so the only way to bring a teacher into that school is by our aeroplanes. And so there's a couple of communities where we do that. There's, you go to a number of other parts of, I've forgotten the place I was going to, Lake Murray. If you go to Lake Murray in PNG, okay, there you've got 27 communities around the outside of a lake. Okay, the only way they can get out has been in a dugout canoe. And we did an article on this in one of the previous magazines. And 3 days to get out in this canoe. We worked with the local community and the local government officers and organisations, and we now have a amphibious caravan there, right? And that plane is able to land at these communities and brings out the people who need support and help. So instead of it taking 3 days to get to a hospital, we can get them there now in 20 minutes.
How does it work then? So you obviously have an Australian operation, you obviously work in PNG, but obviously it's a global organisation as well. Can you give us an idea of almost the scale of what you do? Because people may not have heard of you guys, but you're a huge, huge thing. I think you say on your website, you're like maybe not one of the biggest airlines in the world, but one of the airlines that flies to the most destinations.
We are, and we like to see ourselves as the largest humanitarian airline in the world, right? I mean, we operate 120 aircraft. Okay, so that puts you in some scale of the size. And as we said earlier, 24 countries, thousands of communities within those countries. We support over 1,500 other organisations. So that starts to put some dimensions around it. Every 5.5 minutes, an MAF plane takes off or lands somewhere in the world, making a difference.
Now, obviously, I'm kind of intrigued by what people can do to help. Now, presumably you would like donations, but you also want like boots on the ground, help, volunteers. Get me an idea of what you're looking for, because our audience, there's lots of pilots, cabin crews, ground staff, people of all shapes and sizes doing all sorts of roles. I presume most of them would be very much of use to you. So what are you looking for? Yeah, so look, we look for a range of things, right? So as you say, obviously, money is something that we always need and everybody needs. And so donations is an important part of our work. In terms of people, we need pilots, right? We need engineers. Engineers are critical because we can't fly the planes without the engineers, right? And we need the support staff on the ground in the offices and both in the programs around the world and also in our head office and our central locations. And then we need volunteers. So if you look at what we do here in Australia as we organise events to maybe recruit pilots or engineers, then we need people to help us organise those. Because if we're holding an event in Queensland or WA, then it's really challenging for us based in Sydney to
to get over there and take our people over there to set it up and organise it. Whereas the volunteers who help us are able to do that. We have volunteers who go and talk in schools. We have volunteers who attend the air shows. We have volunteers who go and talk in businesses with us and on our behalf. So there's lots of opportunities for people to help. We even had last year up in Arnhem Land where we have a large number of families and crew working up there, living up there. And the housing in Arnhem Land really suffers, okay? And the weather is really not kind to it. So we had 10 weeks where we had crews going in there to help us rebuild some of the houses and support. So the range of things that people can get involved with is so broad.
I suppose it's not just the people operating the flights, it's having people in those communities that are able to kind of spread the word, because otherwise, if you have someone that's, say, a victim of domestic violence or needs any kind of help, they need to know who they can talk to, right, to sort of get them out of there and sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely they do. And so there's people in the communities. We work with all the organisations that you would think of, right? Whether it's the Red Cross, whether it's St John's Ambulance, all of those people we partner with, we support, we work with. And so when you're in those communities, those organisations and the people there say, you need some help with this, MAF is the people to go to. Right? You go into PNG and you'll see everybody knows that MAF are the people that you go to when you go outside those local areas. You go to Timor, and there, if you need help from a medical point of view, the first place they go outside of Dili is MAF. And we could be having this conversation, and I have it regularly with the pilots in Timor, and all of a sudden Adam would get a phone call and say, sorry, Chris, I've got to go. And you'll be off to do a medevac flight. And it's just because we're there and because we've been there for a long while, right? That's the other thing which I think is really important for people to understand, is that we've been around now 80 years. This is our 80th year this year that we're celebrating. And that means that in a lot of these places, we're very well known. We're established. We're not going to leave. So the local people can trust that MAF is going to be the person who's going to support them and help them.
Could you give us an idea of a kind of the scale of the operation in Australia, maybe like roughly how many people you have and kind of how many aircraft you've got as well?
Yeah, sure. So in Australia's an interesting setup, right? So we've got all parts of the organisation in Australia, okay? So if you go to Arnhem Land is where is our program base, okay? And so there, I don't know how many planes we've got. If you go to Arnhem Land, we've got let's say we've got 8 planes in Arnhem Land that we're operating on a regular basis, okay? And they would be doing a range of activities from regular shuttle services to medivacs to domestic violence rescues to actually helping move politicians and people around, right? The crew in Arnhem Land, both including the pilots, including the engineers and the support staff, is in the order of 20 to 30 people, right, based in Arnhem Land. If you go to Mareeba in North Queensland, that's where we've got a maintenance hub. And that maintenance hub there looks after Arnhem Land, looks after PNG, and looks after Timor. So if there's a major piece of maintenance on the planes, we bring them out of the programs into Mareeba. So at Mareeba, we've got a full team of engineers, both Lamies and Amies. We've got 2 major hangars, one of which we actually use as a paint shop, right? So that we can repaint the planes at the various points in their life. We've also next door to that in Mareeba got a training centre where we train pilots. So you can come and get your PPL and train to be a pilot with MAF or to go off on your own separately afterwards. So Mareeba is a big centre for us. And then down the road from Mareeba in Cairns is our operations hub for the Asia-Pacific region. And again, there you've got flight operations, you've got engineers, you've got personnel, you've got finance, you've got all the people there. And then down in Sydney, we've got our recruiting hub. So we recruit and we raise funds to support the rest of the organisation. So Australia is a unique setup within MAF.
And I understand you've got a new aircraft added to your fleet. Somebody might tip me off about that.
Hey.
Tell us a little bit more about that and what, because presumably the more aircraft you have, it can have a huge difference of what you can do each week.
Yes, it does. It makes a huge impact, right? So we've just taken delivery of a new Cessna C208 Caravan, which we are really thrilled to have, and it's come from a donation from a couple in the UK. And so it's on its way to PNG. It's going to be based in PNG. It's going to be based out of Mount Hagen initially, and it will then add to services that we operate there. What the beauty of it is going to be is that with the Caravan, it enables us to actually be more productive because we can carry more people, we can carry more cargo, more payload. So it's a really cool addition to the fleet there, and enables us to bring some of the smaller planes out of PNG and use them in other locations as well. So we can expand the work that we do, not just in PNG, but also in Timor and in some of the African nations as well, with the fleet that we can cascade out of PNG. So that's the new plane that's just arrived. It's been in Mariba being set up, right, ready to go to PNG. And we're now touring it, bringing it down through the East Coast all the way down for Avalon, stopping at a number of locations on the way.
I mean, how many kind of flights are you doing a week with this? Or, I mean, just to get an idea of the scale of what you do, because I imagine there's probably occasions where you also have to get people out of somewhere quite quickly. You have to sort of spring into action as well.
Yeah, so look, the planes are flying every day, right? So they may be flying 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes it's on a standard operation, as we said, like a charter or a shuttle, as we would call it. But the beauty of what we do as well is that if you look at if it's a domestic violence or a medevac need, because of the way we operate, we're able to pivot. So we could have a plane out in, let's go for Africa, let's go somewhere new. So we could be in Uganda on a shuttle in Uganda supporting aid organisations reaching some of those refugee hubs. And then all of a sudden there is a call into our office saying, hey, we've got a medevac flight. We need to get somebody back into Jansi, which is where our head office is in Uganda, and we need to get somebody airlifted into there. Because of the nature of the work that we do and the way we're set up, we can then pivot that plane and move it and reroute it so that it can then pick up that medevac patient and bring them back to where we can get them help. So it's actually a really cool setup. So while we'll have a plan and we'll have a schedule and we'll have the flights laid out, it's not uncommon for these planes to change direction, change course during the flight to support and help other people.
And can you talk us a little bit about the kind of the history of the organisation? Because like you say, it goes back 80 years globally. It's that's an extraordinarily long amount of time to be in existence, to grow and to evolve. Can you give us a brief overview? I mean, we don't need the origin story, but, a brief overview of how you guys came into existence and how you've grown this thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely we can. So look, we started after World War II. And what it came from is a number of pilots in the US, in the UK, and actually over here in Australia and New Zealand, came out of the war and basically what their challenge themselves was really around how do we use aviation for good, right? They had been bomber pilots or fighter pilots in the war, so they had learnt their trade as a pilot, their skills, right? And they came out with, well, how do we use aviation for good? What can we do to support communities, to support people in need using aviation? Several of them had flown all around the world during the war, right? And so they had seen the challenges in really remote areas, right? And so therefore they were able to say, okay, well, what could we do? So they actually started independently. And they didn't have the internet, they didn't have mobile phones, right? But through actually some journals and some media, they started to find out about each other. So the people in the US, and the people in the UK, and the people over Australia and New Zealand found out about each other and then connected together. And from there, they started to operate. And so we initially worked in Africa and in South America, and then have expanded over into Asia Pacific as well as the years have gone. And so we've operated. We actually worked out that we've had some presence in 78 countries over the course of our 80 years. So we didn't quite get to 80 countries in 80 years. We should just go and visit 2 more. But we've had a presence in 78 countries over those 80 years. And that's been doing the whole range of things that you can think of, right? As we've said, it's education, it's health, it's supporting other aid organisations, it's working with commercial organisations at times, it's working with religious organisations, Christian organisations. We've covered the whole breadth. We've worked on disaster relief, so a number of the major natural disasters over the years, we've been there and supported because the planes can get into those locations as well. So we've done a huge range of activities over many, many years.
It's interesting you spoke a little bit earlier and just about then about working with other organisations, because we imagine a charity organisation being within itself, but you're operating planes, you're working with other organisations. Can you talk me through some of the other people you work with? Because I find that really fascinating and interesting. That you're there for other charities too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. So you go. So as I commented earlier, right, I was in Uganda late last year, and Uganda is an interesting country in that it's now in the region, one of the more stable countries in that, settled countries in that part of Africa. And bordering it is South Sudan, Sudan to the north of South Sudan, and then DRC. And at the moment, tragically, there's a lot of refugees streaming out of those countries, and they're coming into Uganda. And so we're working in Uganda with a range of refugee supporting activities with a number of the United Nations organisations, UNICEF, Oxfam, World Vision. All of those people are there trying to reach those refugee camps. And with the planes, we're able to get them there so much more easily than any other means that they could do. If you come over to Australia, we work with a number of the medical organisations. So it might be the Red Cross, it might be the St John's Ambulance. We also partner at times with the Royal Flying Doctors and CareFlight. So their planes tend to be larger than the MAF planes, and so the MAF planes can go into some of the landing strips that they can't get to. And so we would pick up a medevac patient, bring them back to, let's say, Nhulunbuy or Gove, and then CareFlight would pick up that patient and take it on to and take them back to Darwin. So we partner with organisations everywhere we operate. We're partnering with different organisations.
What would happen if you guys didn't exist? Now, that sounds like a strange question to ask, but you know what I mean? That there is not necessarily a state service like what you provide. Presumably, like, you know, let's just say if you guys were to disappear tomorrow, what would be the consequences of that? Because what you're providing is an absolutely essential service. It's not like a nice optional extra. You guys, people rely on you, you know, lives fall apart if you don't exist.
Look, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I think the impact on these communities would be devastating for many of them, right? I think a number of those communities just could not exist, or they would go back to where they were previously, and that was not a healthy existence or a sustainable existence in the world we live in today. And so I think for us, if we aren't there, if you look at, let's say, Arnhem Land, if we're not there, then those communities just, what do you do in the wet season, right? The roads are impassable, right? So how do you get out and about? You can't, right? So your education would struggle or stop. Your food supplies, you can't bring your food supplies in, right? You can't get medical help in. So the community just would go back to having to walk for days and days and days, and which probably wouldn't be sustainable in this day and age.
And just as we get towards the end, but what's the future for you guys? What are you looking to do next? You're growing your fleet. You're looking for more people. How does the next kind of couple of years work for you?
I thought you were going to ask me for the next 80 years. Look, the next couple of years is...
We can do 80 years
We can do 80
yeah.
years. We can do a couple of years. We don't care.
Yeah.
Look, for us, the future is exciting. I think where we operate today, in most of those geographies, we will continue to operate, right? Our vision and our aim is always to try and get to a point where a community can sustain itself without us being there, right? But a lot of those communities, it just can't happen. So you go to PNG, a lot more investment there in terms of updating the fleet, updating the infrastructure that we have to support that. If you go and look around the world, there are a number of governments, there are a number of bodies who are reaching out to us even today, asking us to go into their country or go into new areas of their countries. And so we work with those people now, right? So Bougainville, which is a part of PNG there, we're looking at how do we go into that area there, right? There's other parts of the world that we are talking to or we're being spoken to about, can we go and support in those areas? And so we are reaching out and all the time being spoken to and being asked, can we go to these places? And for us, the challenge is about, as you say, if we have the people, if we have the resources, we can do it.
So on that note, on the final point, we've got a lot of people listening who can help. We've established that earlier. What do they want to do? What should they do if they want to get in touch? Go to the website? Is there an email? If they think, hang on a minute, I can give you my services, what do they do next?
Okay, so go onto our website, www.maf.org.au. So www.maf.org.au. And on there, it says, how do you want to get involved? How do you want to help? So you can volunteer, you could support us with financially. You could just get our magazines. There's a range of information and a range of opportunities there to support us.
Well, on that note, Chris, I loved your passion. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
And we will be back on this show the same time next week. But for now, from me, goodbye.